I woke up in my car at 3:47 a.m. with blood on my hands and no memory of how I got there. The engine was still running. Cold air blasted from the vents. My knuckles were split open, bruised purple and swollen. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a thin cut across my left cheek that I didn't remember getting. The passenger seat was empty, but there was a dent in the headrest, like someone had been sitting there, leaning back hard. I was parked on a dirt road I'd never seen before. Pine trees pressed in on both sides, their branches scraping against the windows when the wind picked up. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my sister. The last thing I remembered was leaving work at 6 p.m. 9.5 hours gone. I tried to start a voice memo to document what I was seeing, but my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone. When I picked it up, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was dirt under my fingernails, fresh dirt, and my shoes were caked with mud that was still wet. I should have driven straight to a hospital. I should have called the police, but I didn't. Because that's when I saw it in my rearview mirror. A figure standing in the road behind me, perfectly still, too far away to see clearly but close enough to know they were watching me. I hit the gas without thinking. The car fishtailed on the loose gravel and I didn't look back until I hit pavement 20 minutes later. When I finally did, the road behind me was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random, that whoever, or whatever, that was, they'd been waiting for me specifically. And somehow, I knew this wasn't the first time. It started 6 weeks earlier, though I didn't realize it at the time. I'm a property inspector. I go into foreclosed houses, condemned buildings, places people have abandoned. I document damage, check for hazards, file reports. It's usually boring work, mold, broken windows, squatters who left in a hurry, but it pays well and I don't mind being alone. The Clearwater house was different from the start. The file said it had been abandoned for 8 months after the owner died. No next of kin, no estate dispute. The bank just wanted it cleared for sale. Simple job. I'd be in and out in 2 hours. The house was at the end of a dead-end street in a neighborhood I'd never heard of, even though I'd lived in this city my whole life. The street sign was so faded I almost missed the turn. When I pulled up, I sat in my car for a minute, staring. The house looked maintained. The lawn was cut. The windows were clean. The mailbox wasn't overflowing. If the file hadn't told me it was abandoned, I would have assumed someone still lived there. I checked the address 3 times. It matched. I grabbed my clipboard and camera and walked up to the front door. The key from the lockbox worked on the first try. No rust, no sticking. The door swung open smoothly and I stepped inside. The air smelled like lavender, not the musty, chemical smell of air freshener trying to cover up decay. Real lavender, fresh. Every room was clean, no dust on the furniture, no cobwebs in the corners. The kitchen looked like someone had just finished washing dishes, a single plate sitting in the drying rack. There was even food in the refrigerator, milk that hadn't expired, fresh fruit in a bowl on the counter. I checked my file again. 8 months. The owner had been dead for 8 months. That's when I noticed the photographs. They lined the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Family photos mostly. A middle-aged woman smiling. A younger man, maybe her son. Birthday parties, graduations. Nothing unusual, except in every single photo in the background there was a door. Not the same door, different doors. Sometimes barely visible at the edge of the frame, sometimes centered behind the subjects, but always a door and always closed. I don't know why it bothered me, but it did. I moved into the master bedroom. The bed was made. A book sat on the nightstand, a bookmark placed about halfway through, reading glasses folded on top. I picked up the book without thinking, a thriller about a woman who starts receiving messages from her future self. When I set it down, I noticed something on the bookmark. A date written in pen, yesterday's date. My skin went cold. I told myself someone had been showing the house. A real estate agent. Someone from the bank. That's why it was so clean. That's why there was fresh food. But the file specifically said no one had been inside since the owner died. I should have left, but I needed to finish the inspection. I needed the photos for my report. I moved through the house methodically, documenting everything. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, finished basement, everything spotless, everything wrong. The basement was the worst. It was completely empty except for a single chair in the center of the room facing the wall. No table, no storage, just the chair. On the wall in front of it, someone had drawn a symbol in what looked like chalk. A circle with lines radiating outward like a child's drawing of the sun. But the lines were uneven, shaking, like whoever drew it had been trembling. I took a picture of it. The flash went off, and in that split second of white light, I saw something that made my breath catch. Someone was sitting in the chair. Then the flash faded, and the chair was empty. I ran. I don't remember climbing the basement stairs or locking the front door behind me. I just remember sitting in my car, engine running, staring at the house. Nothing had changed, it still looked perfect, lived in, normal. I checked the photo I'd taken in the basement. The chair was empty in the picture. No figure, no shadow, just an empty chair facing a wall with a chalk symbol. But I'd seen someone, I was sure of it. I filed my report that night, marked the house as clear, and tried to forget about it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 3 days later when I got a call from my supervisor. She wanted to know why I'd listed the Clearwater house as occupied in my report. I told her I hadn't. I'd marked it abandoned just like the file said. She read my report back to me, every line I'd written. Except at the end, in the notes section, there was an additional sentence I didn't remember typing. Current resident requests privacy. Do not disturb. I'd never written that. I was sure of it. But it was there in my report, in my handwriting, dated and signed. That night I dreamed about the chair in the basement. In the dream, I was sitting in it, staring at the symbol on the wall. And behind me, I could hear breathing. Slow, steady, patient. When I woke up, my hands were covered in chalk dust. If you think this was coincidence, like the video, comment your theory and subscribe. Because what happened next made me realize something terrifying. I tried to convince myself it was stress. I'd been working too much, not sleeping enough. Maybe I'd had a minor breakdown and didn't remember typing that note. But then the letters started. The first one came 2 weeks after the Clearwater inspection. No return address. My name and address written in perfect block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a photograph printed on it. It was me, standing in the basement of the Clearwater house, taking a picture of the chalk symbol. But I'd been alone in that basement. I was sure of it. The photo was taken from behind the chair, from where someone would have been sitting, watching me. There was no message, just the photo. I brought it to the police, but they said without a threat, there wasn't much they could do. Probably a prank. Maybe someone from the real estate company messing with me. The second letter came 3 days later. This time it was a list of addresses, 4 of them. I recognized them immediately, houses I'd inspected over the past 6 months, but there was a 5th address at the bottom I didn't recognize. I looked it up. It was in the same neighborhood as the Clearwater house, another dead-end street. I told myself not to go. I told myself this was getting dangerous, that I should just ignore it and file a police report. But I went anyway. The house at the 5th address looked similar to the Clearwater place. Well-maintained, clean, wrong. I didn't have a key this time, but I walked around the property, looking through windows. The interior was different, modern furniture, minimal decor. But there was something familiar about it, something that made my skin crawl. Then I saw it. On the living room wall, visible through the front window, was a photograph. A family photo. The same middle-aged woman from the Clearwater house, the same younger man, but in this photo they were standing in front of a different house, and in the background, barely visible, was a door. I took out my phone to take a picture, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. A man stood at the edge of the property watching me. He was thin, maybe in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket despite the warm weather. His face was unremarkable, the kind of face you'd forget immediately, but his eyes were wrong, too focused, too still. "You inspected my mother's house," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong person," I said, backing toward my car. "The Clearwater house," he continued, taking a step closer. "You were in the basement, you saw the chair." I froze. "Who are you?" "Did you sit in it?" he asked, ignoring my question. "Did you sit in the chair?" "No, I didn't." "You should have." He smiled, but there was nothing warm in it, nothing human. "That's what she did, that's what they all do. They sit, they wait, and then they understand." "Understand what?" He tilted his head, studying me like I was an insect under glass. "You're not ready yet, but you will be. They chose you weeks ago. You just didn't notice." I ran to my car and locked the doors. When I looked back, he was still standing there, watching. Not following, just watching. I drove straight home and didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. But on the 3rd day, I got another letter. Inside was a photo of me sleeping in my bed, taken last night, from inside my bedroom. And underneath, in the same block letters, "You can't run from what you've already become." That night I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner of my bedroom, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was a chalk mark on the wall. Just a small circle with radiating lines. The same symbol from the Clearwater basement. I scrubbed it off immediately, but when I woke up the next morning it was back, freshly drawn. I hadn't heard anyone enter my apartment. My door was still locked. The windows were closed. But someone had been there while I slept, inches from my bed, drawing on my wall. That's when I realized the truth. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to prepare me. For what, I didn't know yet. But I was starting to understand that this wasn't random. This was a process, a ritual. And I was already too far in to stop it. I started seeing the man everywhere. Not following me exactly, just there. In the coffee shop I stopped at on my way to work, in the parking lot of my gym, standing across the street when I left my apartment. Always watching, never approaching. I filed a restraining order, but when the police tried to serve it, they couldn't find him. The address he'd given when they questioned him didn't exist. The name he'd used wasn't in any database. "Are you sure this person is real?" the officer asked me, and I wanted to scream. Of course he was real. I'd seen him, talked to him. He'd sent me letters. Except when I went to get the letters from my apartment, they were gone. The photos, the list of addresses, the threat, all of it. Gone. My sister came to stay with me after I called her crying at 2 a.m. She thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe she was right. I couldn't tell anymore. But she saw the chalk symbol. I'd stopped trying to erase it. It came back every time, sometimes within hours. My sister stood in my bedroom doorway, staring at the mark on the wall, and her face went pale. "Where did you see this?" she asked. "It keeps appearing. Someone's breaking in and—" "No," she interrupted. "Where did you see this symbol first?" I told her about the Clearwater house, the basement, the chair. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. It was old, grainy, printed from a newspaper article. The headline read, "Local woman dies in apparent suicide." The photo showed a house, the Clearwater house. "This was 12 years ago," my sister said. "I remembered it because of how weird the case was. She locked herself in her basement and wouldn't come out. When they finally broke in, they found her sitting in a chair, staring at a wall. She'd drawn symbols all over the basement. This symbol. She pointed at the chalk mark on my wall. They said she kept repeating the same thing over and over. I understand now. I'm ready. My blood ran cold. That was 12 years ago, I said. The file said she died 8 months ago. My sister frowned. That's impossible. I remember this clearly. It was big news. The woman who died was. She stopped, zooming in on the newspaper photo on her phone. The woman in the photo was the same woman from the Clearwater house. Same face, same age. But 12 years should have passed. This doesn't make sense, my sister whispered. That night, she slept in my living room. I tried to sleep in my bedroom, but I couldn't stop staring at the chalk symbol on the wall. At 3:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of my sister screaming. I ran to the living room. She was standing by the window, pointing outside, her face white with terror. There are people, she gasped, outside just standing there. I looked. There were 7 of them, standing in a perfect circle around my apartment building, all facing in, all perfectly still. One of them was the man from the 5th address. One of them was the woman from the Clearwater house. She'd been dead for 12 years, but there she was, standing under a streetlight, staring up at my window. I called 911. The operator said she'd send a car. But when the police arrived 15 minutes later, the people were gone. The officers searched the area, checked security footage, found nothing. There's no one on the cameras, one officer said. Are you sure you saw someone? My sister nodded, but I could see doubt creeping into her eyes. The officer left me his card and suggested I speak with a counselor. After they left, I checked my phone. I had a new email from an unknown address. No subject line, just an attachment. A photo of me and my sister, taken from outside my apartment window, tonight, while the people were standing in their circle. But in the photo, there were 8 people in the circle. Not 7. 8. And the 8th person was me. I know how this sounds. I know you think I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. But let me finish. After that night, my sister left. She wanted me to come with her to stay somewhere else, but I couldn't, because I was starting to understand. The pattern. I went back to the Clearwater house. I broke in this time. I didn't care about laws or consequences anymore. I needed answers. The house was different, empty now. No furniture, no photographs. The walls were bare. But the basement was the same. The chair, the symbol. I sat in the chair. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to know what they'd seen, what the Clearwater woman had understood that made her ready. The moment I sat down, everything changed. The basement didn't change physically, but I could feel it. The weight of something watching me, not from the room, from somewhere else, somewhere outside normal space. And then I saw them, overlaid on reality like a double exposure. Hundreds of people, thousands, all sitting in chairs just like mine, in basements just like this one, all over the world, all throughout time. I saw the Clearwater woman sitting in her chair 12 years ago, and 12 years before that, and 12 years before that. The same woman, the same moment, repeated over and over. Because she hadn't died, not really. She'd been selected, prepared, and when she was ready, she'd been moved. Not to another place, to another instance. I saw my own face among them, not sitting yet, but standing in basements, looking at chairs, trying to understand. Dozens of versions of me, all at different stages of the same process. The pattern wasn't random. It was a recruitment, a selection. Something vast and incomprehensible was choosing people, testing them, preparing them. And when they were ready, when they understood, it moved them somewhere else, somewhere outside the normal flow of time. And it had been doing this forever. I understood now why the Clearwater woman looked the same after 12 years, why the house seemed maintained despite being abandoned, why the letters disappeared. Because time, didn't work the same way for those who'd been selected. We existed in loops, preparing, learning, until we were ready to move to the next stage. And I was almost ready. I could feel it, the pull, the invitation. Part of me wanted to run, to reject it, to hold onto my normal life. But another part, a part that had been growing since I first saw that chair, wanted to sit, to wait, to understand completely. When I stood up and left the Clearwater house that day, I knew I'd be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but I'd be back. Because the pattern doesn't let go once it chooses you. And as I drove home, I realized something that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I'd stopped aging. I looked in the rearview mirror at my reflection, at the cut on my cheek from that night I woke up in my car. It looked exactly the same as it had 6 weeks ago, not healing, not fatting. Frozen. My sister had noticed too, though she hadn't said anything. The way she'd looked at me that last morning, like she was seeing a stranger. Because I was becoming one. The missing time, the chalk symbols appearing in my bedroom, the blood on my hands. I'd been sitting in that chair already, hadn't I? Not just thinking about it, actually sitting in it, during the hours I couldn't remember. Practicing, preparing, becoming ready. And that figure I'd seen in my rearview mirror that first night, standing in the road behind me. I know who it was now. It was me. Not a future version, not a past version. Just another instance of me, existing simultaneously in the same loop, getting ready for the same transition. The woman from the Clearwater house had been right. Once you understand, once you're truly ready, you don't die, you don't disappear. You just move. And you keep moving forever, through infinite instances of the same moment, the same choice, the same chair. Until you finally become part of the pattern itself. I'm writing this because I need someone to know. To understand that if you ever see a house that looks lived in when it should be abandoned, if you ever find a room with nothing but a chair facing a wall, if you ever see chalk symbols appearing where they shouldn't, don't investigate. Don't sit in the chair. Because the pattern is always watching, always selecting, always preparing the next group. And once it chooses you, you can't unchoose it. You can only wait until you're ready. I'm almost ready now. I can feel it every time I close my eyes, every time I lose track of time, every time I find myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, not remembering how I got there. The next time I sit in that chair, I don't think I'll be able to stand up again. But here's the thing that terrifies me most. I'm not sure I want to. If this story unsettled you, like the video, comment what you think is really happening and subscribe. Because some stories don't end when the video ends. Sometimes they follow you home. Sometimes you're already sitting in the chair, and you just don't know it yet.